I stood there in the dim light of the backstage, just moments before I was to step onto that stage. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, but I wasn't nervous, I was determined. After all, I wasn't supposed to be here. This was the life I'd dreamed of for years, but it never seemed possible, not with my past. I wasn't always someone you'd expect to see in the spotlight. A few years ago, I was just an average guy working a 9-to-5 job, trying to make ends meet, struggling with bills, with a relationship that felt like it was slowly slipping through my fingers. I was a nobody, or at least that's what she told me every day. My wife. I remember those early years together, when we were filled with excitement, big dreams, and love that felt unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, things changed. I changed. I didn't have the success she had hoped for, the career she envisioned for me. She wanted a man who would push beyond limits, a man who'd be something more. And I wasn't that man, not yet. But it wasn't just the lack of career progress. It was the constant criticism, the late-night conversations where she'd say things like, "You're never going to make it. You're a nobody, and you're dragging me down with you." I'd stand there, numb, hearing her words cut deeper than any blade could. Yet I stayed. Because, in the back of my mind, I thought things would get better. That maybe if I just worked a little harder, I could show her I wasn't the failure she believed me to be. I was wrong. The turning point came one night. Right after a long day at work, I walked into the living room, ready to tell her about an opportunity that could change everything. I had been offered a chance finale, a breakthrough that could launch my career. But as I opened my mouth to speak, she cut me off with a smirk, one that I couldn't quite place. "You think I'm going to celebrate your little promotion?" "No, not anymore. I can't keep living in this fantasy world where you're going to suddenly become someone. It's too late for us. I've made up my mind." Her words were cold, deliberate, and they hit me like a tidal wave. I stood there in shock, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't just a bad day. It was the end. The betrayal wasn't just in her words. It was in the way she had already checked out, emotionally and mentally. I should have left that night. But I didn't. I stayed. And that's where the story begins. The story of how I was about to prove her wrong. How I went from the man she thought was a nobody to the man she would be forced to watch from the audience, cheering me on from afar. But I didn't know it then. All I knew was that I was a broken man, standing at a crossroads, unsure of where to go next. I could feel the weight of everything: my marriage, my self-worth, and the deep anger building inside me. I wasn't going to let her win. For weeks, I walked around in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the world I thought I knew was crumbling around me. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, that she was frustrated with her own life and taking it out on me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something much darker was happening. I'd wake up every day to the same emptiness. She was there physically, but mentally, emotionally, she was gone. The house felt cold even when the heat was turned up. Her eyes no longer sparkled when she looked at me. It was as though I was invisible, like she didn't even see me anymore. I remember the day she stopped asking about my day, stopped pretending to care about the little things I would tell her. The void between us stretched wider with each passing day, till I could barely recognize the woman I had once loved. And then the small things started to add up, things I had ignored before. At first it was nothing, just a whisper of doubt. But as I thought more, as I felt the hurt gnawing at me, I couldn't let it go. One evening, I found a receipt in the back of her purse. She was always meticulous about keeping her things neat, so when I saw it lying there, half hidden, my heart skipped a beat. It was for a dinner, expensive way more than we usually spent. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she had gone out with friends, I reasoned. But something about the date on the receipt didn't sit right with me. I couldn't let it slide. That night, after she had gone to bed, I sat up in the dark, going through her phone. I knew it was a violation. I told myself I was only doing it to calm my mind, to put my suspicions to rest. I wasn't expecting anything, but I found more than I bargained for. There, hidden among texts from her friends, was an exchange between her and someone else, a name I didn't recognize. "Are you sure it's all set for tomorrow? The papers are signed?" The message read, followed by, "I'll be there. We'll make sure everything goes smoothly." I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands shaking. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the evidence right in front of me. She was involved in something that didn't just involve me. And the way she was speaking to this person, it sounded more like a business deal than an affair. But who was she talking to? What was she doing behind my back? I spent the next few days in a cloud of suspicion. The phone was the first crack. But the more I looked, the more I started to piece things together. I remembered the nights she started coming home late. No real explanation, just excuses. She'd say she was working or catching up with an old friend. But it didn't add up. I started paying attention to the subtle changes in her routine. The way she would lock her phone when I walked into the room, the way her smile felt forced, as if she was pretending to care. One afternoon, I followed her after work. I told myself I wasn't going to do it. I had no reason to. But the gnawing in my stomach wouldn't let up. I had to know the truth, even if it tore me apart. I trailed her from a distance as she drove to an unfamiliar part of town. I didn't know where she was going, but it wasn't home. When she pulled into a parking lot, I parked on the other side and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. She got out of the car and walked into a building, an office building, the kind I'd never seen her go to before. My stomach twisted. She had always been vague about her work, but this felt wrong. I watched from my car, my mind racing. I didn't want to confront her, not yet. But I needed to know. As the minutes passed, my mind spun with all the possibilities. She was hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. But what? Was it another man or something else? Maybe she'd been using me, playing me for the fool I had become. Maybe she was planning to leave me for someone with more to offer, someone who wasn't just a nobody. And that's when it hit Mitha cold. Harsh truth that I couldn't ignore anymore. I was nobody to her. That wasn't just the words she had said in the past. It was a reality. I had been living in a lie, trying to make something out of nothing. The woman I had loved, the woman I had given everything for, had already decided her path. I wasn't part of it, but I wasn't ready to give up. I couldn't. Not yet. So I waited. I waited in my car, heart heavy with betrayal and disbelief, knowing that the truth would come to light one way or another. And when it did, when I finally uncovered what she had been hiding, what she had been planning behind my back, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The truth was creeping closer with each passing day. And the more I discovered, the more my anger transformed into something else, something colder, sharper, more calculated. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just a man broken by betrayal. I was becoming someone else, someone who wouldn't let this slide, someone who would make her feel the weight of her choices, even if it meant I had to play the long game. After that afternoon of following her, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper, finding the answers that had been slipping through my fingers for so long. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to tip her off. She was smart, and I was starting to realize just how much. She had been playing me for years, but I had to know everything. There could be no more doubt. So I started watching her, but I did it differently now. I was no longer the man who stood in the background, wondering what was going on. Man who paid attention to every detail, who looked at her behavior with a critical eye. It was painful to watch, but I had to do it. I started with the phone. It was still my main source of suspicion. She had always been protective of it, but now it seemed like a fortress. She didn't leave it lying around like she used to. She carried it everywhere, even when she went to the bathroom. But one day, she forgot it on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. The moment I saw it there, unattended, I knew I had an opening. I picked it up carefully, holding it like it might shatter if I moved too quickly. I knew there was a risk if she found out I was snooping. I'd lose everything. But this was it. I couldn't let fear stop me now. I unlocked it. I went straight for the messages. At first, it was just a flood of normal, harmless conversations. Messages with her friends, work updates, nothing out of the ordinary. But then near the bottom, buried in between casual exchanges, I saw his name again. The name I didn't recognize. The name that had haunted my thoughts for weeks. There were more messages between them now. more than just casual talks about business. These were different, intimate, secretive. You've got everything in place, right? One message read, "The deal is on track. No turning back now." I felt the blood drain from my face as I scrolled through more of their conversations. They weren't just planning something. This was a full-blown operation. There were references to the final step and mentions of our future together. My mind raced. Was this an affair? Or was it something worse? Something bigger than I could comprehend? I kept reading. The more I uncovered, the more I saw that this wasn't just about her cheating. This was about her betraying me in ways I had never even considered. Financial deals, investments, business plans, all hidden from me. She had been building a life, a future, without me. And the worst part? She was doing it with someone I didn't even know. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not with just these messages. No, I needed more. I needed something solid, something irrefutable. I needed to make sure that when I confronted her, she couldn't lie her way out of it, so I went deeper. I started looking at the bank statements. I knew she handled most of our finances, but I had access to the accounts. I began tracking everything, the weird transactions, the withdrawals I hadn't noticed before, and then I found it. A series of payments to a company I didn't recognize. Large amounts. Regularly scheduled payments that didn't make sense. I looked them up. The company didn't even exist anymore. It had been dissolved months ago. But there were still payments being funneled through to it. I felt like I was unraveling a web. A web she had carefully crafted to trap me, to keep me from seeing the truth. But now, the pieces were falling into place. I went to the company's old address, hoping to find some answers. It was an office building that was now occupied by another business, but there was something strange about it. The new tenants didn't seem to know much about the place's history, but there was one clue that stood out: the name of the person who had originally owned the company. I'd never heard of him, but there was something about the name that sparked a recognition in the back of my mind. This was where it started to get personal. I remembered a friend of hers, someone she had introduced me to once, years ago. Someone who worked in finance. He'd always been a bit too friendly, always a little too interested in what I was doing. I couldn't be sure, but I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This guy, this new business partner of hers, was he more than just a partner? I had to know. At night, I began tracking his social media. It wasn't hard to find. People like him love to broadcast their success. What I found wasn't what I expected. There he was, smiling in pictures, posting about investments, business achievements, and there it was, a picture of him and my wife. The photo was taken at a gala from years ago. They were standing side by side, close to close for my comfort. It was proof. Proof that they had been in this together for much longer than I thought. But I still didn't have everything. Not the full picture. I started talking to people quietly, discreetly. I wasn't going to go in guns blazing. Not yet. I needed allies. People who knew more about her business dealings. People who could confirm the things I couldn't see. One of her old colleagues, someone she'd been very close to, agreed to meet me. They didn't want to talk, but after a few drinks, they finally opened up. They told me everything. How she'd been playing both sides. How she'd been scheming behind my back. It was starting to sink in. She had been setting up her escape for months, maybe even longer. I had been blind to it, so caught up in the hope that things would get better. Oh, now I wasn't blind anymore. I was preparing to confront her, but I wasn't going in unarmed. I wasn't the same man who had stood in front of her begging for approval. I had become something else, something stronger, something smarter. She wouldn't walk away from this so easily. Not this time. The plan was taking shape. The pieces were falling into place. And I knew I was running out of time. The day had finally come. The moment I had been waiting for, planning for, had arrived. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew this was the only way forward. It wasn't about getting revenge anymore. It wasn't even about hurting her the way she had hurt me. No, this was about something deeper. This was about reclaiming my life, about exposing the lies and the betrayal. showing everyone that I wasn't the man she thought I was. I spent the entire morning preparing, running through every detail in my head. The evidence was all there. The messages, the financial records, the shady business dealings. It was irrefutable. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. I wasn't going to give her the chance to make excuses, to twist the truth. No, I was done being the victim. I had already spent too much time in the shadows. Now, it was time to step into the light. She was at work when I made the call. I didn't tell her what was coming. I didn't need to. I just told her to be home by 6 p.m. and that we needed to talk. It was vague, but it would get her there. I wanted her to think it was something trivial at first, something she could brush off, but I knew the moment she stepped through that door, she would feel the shift in the air. By the time she came home, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, the documents spread out before me, proof of everything she had done, the deception, the lies. The betrayal laid bare in front of her. She stepped in, her eyes flickering around the room as if trying to gauge the mood. She was expecting nothing more than a routine conversation. But when her gaze landed on the papers, her expression faltered for just a second. It was subtle, but I saw it. "What's this?" she asked, her voice steady, though I could hear the slight edge of uncertainty creeping in. She wasn't fooling anyone, least of all me. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, my hands gripping the back of the chair. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I kept it under control. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my composure. "You know exactly what this is," I said, my voice low but firm. "I've been watching, I've been listening, and now I have all the evidence I need. Everything you've been hiding, everything you've been planning, it's all here." Her eyes flickered again, this time with panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. "You think you can just pull the rug out from under me? Leave me for someone else without consequences? You think I didn't know? You think I couldn't see it? But you were wrong." I slammed my hand on the table, the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. "I'm not the fool you thought I was." Her face was pale now, her mouth moving but no words coming out. I could see the realization dawning on her. She knew. She knew this wasn't just a conversation about a little misunderstanding. "You think I didn't know about the company?" I continued. "The payments you were making? The secret meetings? The business deals? I know about it all. Don't even try to lie to me." I threw the papers down on the table, letting them scatter in front of her, the weight of them undeniable. "You've been building a future with him, haven't you? You've been planning your escape while I've been stuck here, working myself to the bone, trying to make something of myself. But you've already made up your mind, and I was just the afterthought." I paused, letting the words sink in. I could see the guilt in her eyes now, the mask of confidence she had worn for so long beginning to crack. But I wasn't done yet. "This isn't just about you and him," I said, my voice growing colder. "This is about everything you've taken from me. The trust, the loyalty, the years I've wasted thinking we were building something together. But now I see what this really was. You were never on my side." She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but I cut her off. "No, don't say anything. Not yet. I've heard enough of your excuses." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and hurt. "But here's the deal. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm not going to let you walk out of here like you're the victim. You want to leave? Fine. But you will not get away with what you've done. Not without consequences." I leaned in closer, my voice low and threatening. "You're going to tell me everything. All of it. You're going to confess. You're going to tell me why you thought it was okay to lie, to cheat, to deceive me. And then you're going to deal with the fallout. Because believe me, I'm not the one who's going to look bad in this situation. You will." She was trembling now, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the table, her face red with shame, her eyes filled with regret. For a moment, I saw something in her, a flicker of the person I had once known. But it was too late. The damage had been done. There's no going back from this. "Do you realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice softer now, almost sad. "You've taken everything from my trust, my love, my respect. And now, I'm taking it back. There was silence for a moment. And then she broke. Her voice was small, barely a whisper, but it was enough. I never wanted to hurt you. She began, but I wasn't listening anymore. I wasn't the same man who had stood before her, pleading for her love. I wasn't the man who would have begged her to stay. I was someone else now, someone who had taken control of his life, his future, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I know, I said, my voice steady. But it's over now. And that was the moment everything changed. The days after that confrontation were a blur. What I had anticipated a final showdown had turned into a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. I had forced her hand, made her confess, but it wasn't just her life that unraveled. It was everything. The truth began spilling out, and once it started, it gained momentum in ways I hadn't foreseen. I remember the phone call I made to her. Business partner. The one I'd found in the messages. I didn't give him a warning. I didn't need to. The moment I told him I had the evidence, the panic in his voice was unmistakable. I told him to get ready for the consequences, legal, professional, public. He tried to talk his way out of it, make excuses, but I was done listening. I had seen. Enough. He was as much a part of this as she was, and he wouldn't be able to hide from the truth either. The next few days were a whirlwind. News about the scandal broke first, through the company's internal channels, and then across local media. The investment firm she had been involved with found itself under scrutiny. There were rumors about fraudulent transactions and insider dealings. Lawyers came knocking. Her reputation, the one she had spent years building, started to crumble before her eyes. The fall from grace was swift. She had used me as a pawn in her game, but now, she was the one who was exposed. And I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. Real shock came when people I thought I could trust started calling friends, former colleagues, even family members. They all had questions. The whispers started, had I known? Was I really that naive? How could I not have seen it? They all wanted answers, everyone except for the one person I had expected to stand by me. Her she didn't reach out, not once. I knew she was trying to hold on to the last shred of dignity she had left, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality in that silence. I had expected anger, regret, maybe even an apology, but there was nothing. Only the sound of her absence. Began cleaning up the mess she had left behind. Things, clothes, jewelry, pictures were scattered around the house. I found myself packing them into boxes, unsure of what to do with them. I didn't want to throw them away. I couldn't. It felt wrong, as if I was erasing every memory of a life I had fought so hard to build with her. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I couldn't let myself be consumed by the past. As for me, the emotional impact of what had happened began to set in. It wasn't just anger or sadness anymore. There was relief, quiet, almost bittersweet relief. I had exposed the truth. I had regained control of my life. But beneath that relief, I still felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of lost trust. It wasn't something I could erase overnight. I began to see the world differently. I wasn't the man who had been desperate for approval. I wasn't the man who had hoped to prove his worth. I had already done that. I had exposed the lies, faced the reality of the situation, and walked away stronger. But the emotions still lingered. The pain wasn't completely gone. I had one, yes, but at what cost? I didn't have the answers to that yet. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. I had been through the worst of it, and now I was finally free. The weeks that followed the fallout were a time of quiet reflection. I moved through my days with a sense of newfound clarity, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The chaos, the anger, the hurt, they all started to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't without effort, but slowly I began to heal. I let go of the remnants of the life I had shared with her. It wasn't just the physical things, the clothes, the photographs, the mementos, but the emotional weight that had tied me to the past. I let go of the constant need to prove myself to someone who had never truly seen me for who I was. I stopped, looking back with regret, stopped asking myself where I had gone wrong. The truth was, I hadn't gone wrong. She had. And I had done what needed to be done to take back control of my life. The work I had put into myself, into building something of my own, began to bear fruit. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I didn't need to be validated. I had spent years thinking that I was just a nobody, just someone caught in a cycle of self-doubt and unmet expectations. But the truth was, I had always been someone. I had always been worthy of respect, of love, of success. I just needed to stop waiting for permission to believe it. I threw myself into my career, not as a means to prove something to her or to anyone else, but because I realized that I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. The business opportunities I had been afraid to pursue before now came with a sense of purpose. I took risks, made decisions, and stood by them. I was no longer paralyzed by fear of failure or by the need for external validation. I was building something for myself, for me. One evening, not long after the storm had passed, I stood outside my apartment, staring out at the skyline. The city had always been overwhelming to me, its endless noise and ambition a reminder of all the things I hadn't achieved. But now, as I looked out over the city, I felt a sense of calm. The world was still loud, still chaotic, but I had learned to find peace in the midst of it. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to anyone's expectations, not hers, not anyone's. It was mine to define. I had also learned how to forgive. Not her, not yet at least, but myself. I had spent so long holding on to guilt, blaming myself for things that were never mine to carry. I had been trying to fix something that was never broken, had allowed myself to be manipulated by her, convinced that if I tried hard enough, I could change the course of our relationship. But I hadn't realized that change could only come from within, and that sometimes the best way to change things was to walk away. In the months that followed, I began to build new relationships, real ones, based on honesty and mutual respect. I found people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them, or how I could make them feel better about themselves. I started dating again, but this time, I wasn't looking for validation or approval. I was looking for someone who could stand beside me, not behind me or in front of me, but beside me. It's an equal. I found joy in the simple things: long walks, good conversations, and quiet moments. I began to appreciate the freedom I had to make my own decisions, to carve my own path without anyone telling me what to do or how to do it. I had become the person I had always wanted to be, the person I had forgotten I could be. The best part was, I didn't have to change for anyone. Didn't know what the future held, and I didn't need to. What I knew now was that I was in control of my own story. I'd come through the fire stronger and more resilient than I had ever been. For the first time in years, I was at peace with who I was. The journey had been painful, but it had also been necessary. I had learned that sometimes the hardest moments in life were the ones that taught us the most about ourselves. And now, I knew who I was. And I knew that I was enough. That was the lesson I had taken from all of this. The lesson that I would carry with me, no matter where life took me next. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that has happened, I realize that the most important lesson I've learned isn't about the betrayal or the revenge. It isn't about proving someone wrong or making them pay for the hurt they caused. No, the real lesson lies in something far more profound. It's about the strength to move forward, the courage to stand tall in the face of betrayal, and the wisdom that comes from reclaiming your own life. We often spend so much of our lives seeking approval, trying to prove our worth to others. We get caught up in the expectations of those around us, in the belief that if we just work hard enough, love enough, or sacrifice enough, we'll finally be enough. But what I've learned, what I wish I could have understood sooner, is that we are enough long before anyone else validates us. True strength isn't about how many times you're knocked down, or how badly you're hurt. True strength is about how many times you get back up, how many times you choose to stand firm and walk away from what's no longer serving you. It's about looking at the wreckage of your past and deciding that it won't define you, that you have the power to build something new from the ashes. In the end, the journey wasn't about her. It wasn't about her lies or her betrayal. It was about me, about finding the courage to face the truth and, more importantly, to walk away from a life that no longer fit who I was becoming. I was no longer the man who was willing to settle for someone else's version of happiness. I was the man who would write my own story on my own terms. And that is where the true power lies, in knowing that, no matter what happens, we have the ability to rise again. No betrayal, no failure, no broken heart can take away the strength that resides within us. So ask yourself, are you living for someone else's approval? Or are you ready to step into your own power? Because when you realize that your worth is not determined by others, that's when you truly begin to live. The question is, are you ready to live?